Let's get started. Please grab your seats because I'm about to introduce Petra Geithner she's the Senior Finance Officer, and Nicolas Sanger, the Senior Project Officer at INTERREG 4C and INTERREG Europe, who will tell us all about INTERREG Europe, the new project. Give them a big hand.
Of course. Thank you very much. I feel like a rock star now. It's the first time I use this kind of microphone. If I look a bit like a zombie or strange, it's because of the things in my glasses. Okay, let's be serious. Let's start. So I am delighted, together with my colleague Petra Geithner from the Secretariat in Lille, to introduce you to the famous now INTERREG Europe program. So the idea is to present you the main features, and you will see that we will go quite quickly on some of these features, because tomorrow morning there will be tutorial sessions where you will have an opportunity to go deeper in certain aspects of the program. When you want to understand INTERREG Europe, you need, of course, to have quite a clear understanding of the context and of the framework, I would call it. You have all heard about the EU 2020 strategy. It was mentioned this morning by the Italian speaker. And this is based on 3 pillars. This gives the overall strategy in the years to come. There is a certain number of indicators we have to reach, all of us, at the regional, at the national, at the member states level. But what is interesting to understand is that these 3 quite abstract, quite macro objectives and very ambitious objectives are translated into 11 thematic objectives that apply to any EU programs, and in particular the program of the EU cohesion policy. So what is it about this EU cohesion policy? I'm sure you know it already quite well. This is a policy that allows regions to catch up, to be more balanced, to have a more sustainable development, and also for the less developed regions to catch up with the most advanced regions. What is new in the 2014-2020 period is that this policy is based on 2 goals. The first one is the investment for growth and jobs. This is managed at the national, at the regional level, depending on the country. And the big bulk of the money, 90% of the funding, goes to this first goal. And the second one is called European Territorial Cooperation, and that's where you will find all the INTERREG programs, including INTERREG Europe. And there's a certain number of elements that are important to understand why INTERREG Europe was developed in the way it is developed. And these are mainly, you can find them in the 2014-2020 regulation. I've just mentioned 2 important elements on this slide. The first one is the objective set for interregional cooperation. The regulation explains what INTERREG Europe should do. And there is a kind of revolution. That's where Michel, the director, say INTERREG 4C looks similar to INTERREG Europe, but in fact, INTERREG Europe is still different from INTERREG 4C. Because up to now, interregional cooperation was supposed to improve, to contribute to the improvement of any kind of policies at local, regional, national levels. The text of the regulation is much more specific. INTERREG Europe is supposed, and interregional cooperation in general, is supposed to contribute to improving the effectiveness of the cohesion policy. And later on in the text, you see that in fact what is meant is that we are there to better improve structural funds, investment for growth and jobs, and European territorial cooperation, the 2 goals I've just mentioned. There are other important principles in the regulation, and they were mentioned by the Commission this morning. The concentration principle, the result orientation principle. I would just say one thing on the concentration. It's not only a thematic concentration, you will see it later, but it's also a concentration in what your projects have to do. You need to be very specific in the policy you would like to improve, and INTERREG Europe is much more specifically about improving structural fund programs. And the result-oriented approach, I will come back to this when describing the projects. So let's come now really to the heart of the day, INTERREG Europe, and its rationale. The rationale, in a way, has not changed. This program is about capacity building. It's about exchanging experience among policymakers in Europe. So this is dedicated to the improvement of the regional development policies. This sounds perhaps a bit abstract, but we will try to make it more concrete in these 2 days. And what you see in bold in the yellow box is that, in particular, the structural funds program. So the mission that I've just mentioned in the regulation is reflected there. This program should help to better implement structural fund programs. And this very strange design, maybe you don't really understand it, it represents all the programs and all the funding going to this EU cohesion policy. It's more than 340 billion euro that will be spent on the EU territory. And the very small dot, it's Interreg Europe, 359 million euro. In a way, this very small dot is at the service of the rest. It is there to make sure the 350 billion euro, the big bulk of the money, is better implemented on the territories, is implemented in a better way through interregional experience, through transfer of experience among regions. So, some facts. The eligible area. I'm sure all of you know that Interreg Europe is the only Interreg programs where all EU regions are eligible. It's the only program which will allow an Irish regions to work with the Bulgarian regions, to work with the Portuguese regions, an Italian region. And we have, of course, Croatia with us in this period, as well as 2 associated countries, Norway and Switzerland. The thematic focus has been mentioned already in the introductory session, so I will not spend too much time on it. Innovation, SME competitiveness, low carbon economy, environment and resource efficiency. The experts will later on develop a bit more what is meant behind these topics. More important, perhaps, it's to come to the actions. What's going to happen? What will the program support in the coming 7 years? There are 2 kinds of actions. The first one are called interregional cooperation projects. And these projects, I think, are quite easy for you to understand because they represent the continuation of what has been going on in the last 10, 15 years in interregional cooperation. It allows a limited number of regions which share a problem, an issue in regional development, either in innovation or in environment. It allows them to better understand each other, to see how others are finding solutions to similar problems, so that after a few years, they are in a position to renew, to improve what is going on in their region. This is about capacity building, this is about exchanging experience again, with the final objective of making my strategy, my program, my policy more efficient. And I'm sorry, I will insist during these 2 days only on that, in particular for structural fund programs, investment for growth and jobs, and cooperation programs. There is a few new elements that were introduced by Erwin already during the interviews. One of the new elements for the projects in the future is that they will be organized in 2 phases. This is compulsory 2 phases. And in terms of duration, it will be up to the project to define the duration of the phase 1. It could be from 1 to 3 years, whereas the phase 2 is fixed. There's no choice. It will be 2 years, meaning that at the end, the maximum possible duration for any project will be 5 years, which is, of course, quite long. What are these phases about? Let's start with the phase 1. The phase 1 is at the heart of what Interreg Europe is about. It's what we call the interregional exchange of experience, the interregional learning. And this is where you will find all the typical activities that have always been financed under interregional cooperation. You have a few examples there. I would refer also to the video of Smart Europe that you have seen earlier. Very interesting peer review process that they organized. This is typically the kind of activities we organize to build the knowledge and to ensure that the knowledge is transformed then into action. And to transform this knowledge into action, there will be an obligation for each region to produce an action plan. This was anyway already the case almost in Interreg 4C, and there's nothing complex, there's nothing difficult about this action plan. It's just to reflect the result orientation approach that we have now everywhere in this new period. It's a commitment of the regions to list, to write down the activities they commit themselves to ensure that the lessons learned from the cooperation are not lost. that something will happen in their region, on the territories. The phase 2 is a new element. The idea is that we would like to keep working with you. We would like to see what happened after the policy change, after things have happened. In very concrete terms, what can we say in terms of territorial impact? So the phase 2 is about monitoring, and I would insist on the word monitoring. It's not implementing. INTERREG Europe, with 300 million euro, will never be able to implement these action plans. It's up to the regions to find the ways to implement them. But it's about monitoring to which extent the action plan has been finally implemented in your regions, and what can we report on it, what kind of success and achievements we can report from it. There will be also possibilities in justified cases to propose pilot actions. If this is the case, the project should ask this before the end of phase 1, and pilot actions is just a specific measure you can include in your action plan. A word on project partnership, even if Petra will develop this a bit more later on. In terms of content, if we want to be serious with improving policies, improving programs, let's be clear. You need to have the organization in charge of this program on board. They should be ideally the driver of the cooperation. So the program will be more demanding than in the past. The involvement of these people will be a prerequisite. And for certain reasons, we know that managing authorities or intermediate bodies or whoever cannot be involved, then a letter of support will be required from these bodies when the policy addressed by this project is in charge of this managing authority. So, to summarize, either the bodies in charge of the policy you want to improve in your project are partner. If they are not a partner, they should provide a letter of support. And this is an eligibility criteria. So this is extremely important. One letter of support missing, project ineligible. And the second element, which is new also concerning the partnership, is what we call the creation of a stakeholder group, one stakeholder group per region. We will come back on this tomorrow morning. The idea is very simple. Even if me, as the city council or the regional council, I am in charge of mobility management policy in my region, I'm not doing that alone. Maybe I have a transport company in charge. Maybe I have some private companies. Maybe I have associations. Maybe I have bicycle things, whatever. To ensure, to increase the impact of cooperation and of the learning, you need to make sure that all these relevant stakeholders, organizations on the territory, relevant to this policy, are also on board. This is the idea behind the creation of the stakeholder group. Let's come to the platform features. This is important because this is the first time the program will try a new initiative. I used to joke sometimes that 7 years ago there was a buzzword. It was capitalization, whatever it means. It's been 2 years, there's a new buzzword. It's platforms. Everywhere you go, you will hear about platforms. It's incredible. But we fall into the trap, and we would like to develop platforms. The idea is very simple. The origin of it comes first from what Erwin has explained. When you have 50, 60 projects working on innovation, there is certainly much more that you can learn from these 200 regions working on innovation, much more that you can learn and that you can pass to others. So this is a capitalization exercise that we would like to continue and to improve in the future. And the second element is, for those of you who are involved in innovation, I'm sure you've heard about it, it's a SEVI platform run by the IPTS, the Commission. And this is, I would say, a team which is dedicated in helping the regions for building their strategy in innovation. 2-3 years ago, we discussed with this platform and with the Commission, and we are thinking that INTERREG Europe should develop this kind of services for the region. To summarize, the objective of the platform is, on one hand, to better exploit what is going on in this program and to make it available in a nice way to other people. But much more challenging, it's a demand-driven approach. It's to make sure that even if you are not in a project, you could still benefit from the program. So people were looking a bit strange at us when we were discussing and launching the platform, because it's a bit abstract what it is exactly. The best definition you can give of a platform, it's a service. it's a provision of a service, and it's done per priority axis. So it's thematic-oriented services. And this is embodied through two main aspects. An online collaborative tool where you would see all the traditional tools you have on this kind of tool, yes, calendar of events, forum for discussion on the very specialized topics, good practice database, good practice of practitioners in innovation, in environment. And next to this online tool, this permanent service, you will have people, you need people, that will make this platform lively. And this is, of course, an important element, the expert team. Very concretely, you see here a few examples of what kind of services a platform could provide. What we'd like to insist on now is that this is a bit demand-driven, and we would love to have a service in the future which would mean that, for instance, I am the Gabrovo region in Portugal. I have just one phone call or one website where I ask, do you know any managing authorities in Europe which has used their thematic objective 1, ERDF money, to do public procurement, innovation public procurement, or pre-commercial procurement? And then 1 week later, the people in charge of the platform would say, yes, we know, and we should contact maybe Eindhoven, or you should contact Stuttgart, because they have used their structural funds to do this. This is a bit the idea behind the platform, and it's a challenging idea. You understand that the target groups, which anyway is very similar to the one of the projects, is mainly targeted at the people involved in the structural funds programs, again, in these investment for growth and jobs and cooperation programs. But, of course, we have Norway, we have Switzerland, we have Stuttgart, Eindhoven, very rich regions that do not receive a lot of structural funds, almost nothing sometimes, although great ideas come from these regions in terms of innovation or other subjects. So even if there's a core primary focus on structural funds, which makes this platform different from a lot of others, it's open to stakeholders that are relevant to the subjects, that can bring something to innovation, to SME competitiveness, to low carbon economy, to environment protection. To conclude, I would say that the two kind of actions I've described are closely interrelated. You understand that the projects are, in a way, the people on the ground, the one that will be able to provide very practical and concrete examples of policy implementation to the platform. They will be the people implementing the policy. So the policy learning platform will be fed by the projects. But vice versa, the policy learning platform is supposed to have a kind of overview to links with other EU programs. And the platform could, in return, say to the projects, maybe you should contact you, Andalusia, you should contact Malopolska, because there's something very interesting in this domain, and you may learn from it. So we hope also that this could provide some services to the project. Thank you very much. I pass now the floor to my colleague, Petra.
Okay. So Nico just introduced you to the activities that are possible within the INTERREG Europe program. I would like now to introduce you to some more partnership criteria, who can actually participate in the projects, and then also another important aspect for you, certainly, the financing that is actually available to you. So who is actually eligible? Of course, like in the past periods, it's again the public bodies. This is, of course, logical. It comes from the program strategy that the policymakers are supposed to be addressed. Then, of course, as Nicola already outlined, the regional and local and national authorities, when they are addressing the policies, developing the policies, they are often surrounded by other bodies that in legal terms are, in our terms, defined as bodies governed by public law. This notion of bodies governed by public law comes from the Public Procurement Directive, and it means bodies that are meeting a need of general interest and that are primarily financed from public funding or under the management of these public authorities. In more practical terms, these are often the regional development agencies or innovation agencies, for example, that support the public authorities in their policy making process. The new feature of the INTERREG Europe program is that we will also welcome public non-profit bodies in the projects. So the emphasis is on private non-profit bodies, meaning that these cannot be any organizations that are meeting a primarily commercial interest. So it still has to be some kind of general interest. These can be business support organizations that are in certain countries of private nature. I'm thinking of chambers of commerce in certain countries, or also some cluster organizations that are already financed by private funding only. If you need to know more about the eligibility status, of course, one day the program manual will be available where you can check the criteria in detail and then see to which extent they apply to you. But then, of course, there is the national contact point on member state level that will also be able to give you some guidance, because the member states are in the end the ones that have to confirm the legal status when it comes to approving the projects. Further project partnership features important to take into consideration for the development of your project, and that is that you need to have partners from at least 3 countries. 2 of them have to be EU member states. The lead partner has to be someone from a public organization or body governed by public law, meaning that the private non-profit bodies cannot be the lead partners of a project. Then there is no distinction between the EU member states and Norway. Partners from both these countries can become lead partners of your project. Our recommendation is that there shouldn't be more than 5 to 10 partners in a project, because we consider that this allows you to have a really intensive learning process within the partnership. Concerning the funding, in total the program consists of 359 million euro. 15.3 million euro will be dedicated to the platforms, and 322 million euro will be shared over the 4 priority axes. The sharing of the funding is done equally, so the thematic objectives, the 4 priorities have an equal weight in the program. We also give a program a recommendation for average ERDF budget to give you some kind of reference and guidance, and we recommend that the ERDF funding is usually between 1 to 2 million euro ERDF per project. In terms of co-financing rates, one important piece of news is that there is no longer a distinction by member state. So all partners from all the EU member states get the same amount of funding. The only distinction that exists is depends on the legal status you are having. So the public partners, as well as the bodies governed by public law, will be able to have 85% of ERDF co-financing, and the private partners will have a little bit less, which is 75%. The Norwegian funding is also managed directly on central level by the program, and the co-financing rate for Norwegian partners will be 50%. Nico mentioned already that Switzerland is also, again, a full partner in the program. However, the funding is still managed nationally. For this, then also, if we have Swiss participants here, we advise you to get in touch with the Swiss National Contact Point to find out more about this. Then, when you move from one program to the other, you are also then checking again what can be improved in terms of financial rules, what has worked well, where is room for improvement. One criteria for this to look at, first of all, is of course a program error rate, and we are audited a lot, so this is a point of attention for everyone. And the good thing is that the error rate was very low in this program. So it means that those of you that have been involved already in INTERREG 4C project managed to implement the project successfully and correctly, also in line with the rules established. So this is a sign for us that things work well, and also that maybe we shouldn't then completely change the rules, but rather build on them and then target more specifically certain aspects of these and improve them. So first of all, what you will see is that there are still the 5 budget lines that existed in the past. So there is funding available for staff costs, for administration costs, for travel and accommodation, and also to finance some equipment, although this plays a very, very small role in the context of INTERREG Europe projects, as we are not financing any real investment or big equipment beyond some office equipment. These 4 budget lines are directly for personnel employed by partners in the project, and the emphasis is clearly on the staff costs, because when you are talking about learning, you are talking about staff, so INTERREG Europe projects are staff-intensive projects. And then there's also a budget line for external expertise, because of, for certain things you might need some external assistance or also to run meetings, so there's also a specific budget line reserved for this. Even though we considered that things work well, we also looked at what can we do to further simplify the project management for you. And we also listened a lot to advice we got from the projects, from the INTERREG 4C program, the advice they've given. And from this, we drew the conclusion that it would be good to give you further budget flexibility. So in the future, there will be no longer a need to split your budget into components. So there's only one budget for the whole work plan, and the only division is into a budget by budget line, but nothing further is required. And a total budget by partners, that's it. Then also we experimented in the past at the end of the previous programming period with the administration cost flat rate, and this is also something we will now do in the INTERREG Europe program for all projects, meaning that automatically on your staff cost budget, a budget of 15% will be added to allow you to cover your administration costs. And this will simplify the management a lot, because you will not have to provide any proofs for this to support this, which will then also make the financial control easier. And in addition, for those of you that in the end will be successful and will be approved projects, you will be granted a lump sum for your preparation costs that will amount to €15,000 total budget, to which then the relevant co-financing rate will be applied. And all this with the intention to make the administrative effort even easier, and to allow you to dedicate your resources more on the project results and on the content. So, what are the next steps? We will certainly come back to it tomorrow, but to give you already a first idea, the provisional timing is that a first call is probably being opened in April 2015, with the foreseen closure in September 2015. And there is no intention to have any thematic restrictions. The call will be open to all investment priorities. There will also be no specific requirement in terms of geographical coverage, and 1/3 of the ERDF budget has been reserved for the projects coming in the first call. Of course, all these things are still under discussion in the programming committee, but this already gives you an idea when you now meet interesting partners and you want to start the project preparation. I think it's important for you also to have these data available to make your project development more concrete. So, thank you.